Welcome back to my Crow Country playthrough. Last time we solved puzzles, fought monsters, and began our search for Edward Crow. In this video, our adventure through the park will reach its end, and we will discover the truth behind Crow Country. Here's a recap of the story thus far. As our adventure began, we were introduced to Special Agent Mara Forrest. She'd been sent to the park to investigate the disappearance of Edward Crow, who had suddenly disappeared after the shutdown of his park, due to mysterious circumstances. A few months before the park had shut down, a girl named Elena had been injured by a mysterious creature and got infected from the wounds. When we arrived at the park, we met an injured man named Arthur lying on the floor. He had come to the park to get a photo of the monsters there and prove that they truly did exist. We helped him and then explored the park and fought off more monsters with the small handgun we had brought with us. We received help from a robot at the park who gave us our first key. We carried on exploring the park and eventually met Marvin Trumbull, who was a business associate of Mr. Crow and was also looking for him. Remember him, he will be important later on. We ended the last video by finding our way into an underwater themed part of the park and obtaining the shotgun. As I wandered through the park, I returned back to the main entrance. Near the exit, a phone was ringing with a mysterious caller. I had no clue who it was, but it was clear he knew what had happened at the park years before. He informed me about mysterious roots that had somehow led to the monsters. I didn't know how simple roots could do this. It was clear there was still a large mystery surrounding the park. Why had they left one root uncut? What was the reason they had cut the others? It didn't make sense yet, but as I continued into the park, I found my way into the employees' corridor. In the center of the room, a large crate had appeared. I went to it and opened the gate, keeping whatever was inside at bay. Another phone rang with the same caller. It must have been connected, he stated. The connection to cutting the roots and the first monster showing up? Whoever the caller was, he had a chance to stop cutting the roots and possibly prevent the whole tragedy of what had happened to the park. But whoever the caller was had been blinded by money and greed and had carried on cutting them. Without a clear view of what came next, I decided best to return to parts of the map I had already searched to view them again and see if there was anything I had missed in my exploration. I found myself back at the restaurant located in the underwater theme part of the park. Multiple monsters had taken shelter there. I remember how those same monsters had caused me to black out in the last episode, and I decided not to take chances this time around. I finished them on the spot. After this, I found a clue to the whereabouts of one of the two missing keys. I knew I was still missing parts of the operation to retrieve it, but I still put the clue in the back of my mind for later use. I carried on with my search and returned to the employees' corridor, where I saw a freakish face staring back at me from the crate I had opened. When I got close though, it drew back. I shot into the crate, but nothing seemed to react from it. I decided just to try and ignore it and carry on my way, but I had barely made it past the crate before it spun apart and a new horrific monster crawled out, chasing me. The monster was strange though. It was just as aggressive as the other monsters, but its body was different, more like an animal than a human, and its mind seemed fractured. It reacted slower and paused, almost as if trying to process what had happened. I was able to eradicate the monster, but not without wounds. Still, I continued on traversing the park. I arrived back to the main entrance of Crow Country and found a new door had been opened. I continued on my way inside. I found a roped-off exhibit. I unfastened this barrier and walked in, and found a strange animatronic sitting on a throne. He said he was the Mushroom King. He invited guests to a feast, but none of them had come. He feared that the mushroom caps he had prepared would be thrown before the animals. To make sure this reality did not come to be for him, I continued around the table, partaking in the mushroom caps in place of the guests. I continued eating the caps. The poison from them began setting in, bringing me closer and closer to death. If I hadn't collected antidotes for my search, I'm sure my life would have ended on that spot. After eating the last mushroom, though, I returned to the king. He thanked me for dining with him. Then, his crown opened up, revealing a small creature inside. He said he was the mushroom boy and that he'd grant me a wish. I was uncertain of what to do and confused, but before I even had a chance to respond, he offered to enhance my handgun. I took this strange gift with gratitude and again carried onwards. I found myself in a room filled with paintings, with a piano in the center of the room. I went to one of the paintings and aligned the title of the painting with notes on the piano. The painting opened and revealed to me a new part of the map. In this new area, I found a young woman, hurt, leaning against the wall. She had clearly been attacked by one of the monsters and was infected. I offered her a medicine pack. It helped her recover and come to her senses. Her name was Natalie. Natalie Crow, the daughter of Edward Crow, the man we were looking for. She was the one that filled out the missing person report. But she said she had talked to a different detective on the phone named Harrison, and seemed surprised that I was the one to come to investigate. We looked far too young to be an officer, she said. This wasn't the first time someone had brought up how young we look, and a mystery was beginning to unfold around our presence. Were we truly the detectives that were sent here, or was something else at play unknown to us? We continued on our way. In a nearby room, we found a man shot dead on the floor. On his desk, there was a videotape. The dead man had recorded a message for Mr. Crow to see. He said that he could no longer remain silent about the crimes Edward Crow had committed at this park. He hoped that Elena never forgave him for what had happened at that park. This confirmed to me that Elena didn't die from the wound she had received years earlier, and was still alive, somewhere. We left the room, leaving the dead man behind, and returned again to the entrance of the park. A man wearing a badge was waiting there with a bike. It was Detective Harrison, the detective Natalie had talked to, but he didn't seem to recognize us, offering to the point to escort us out and that we shouldn't even be there. It seemed he had never even talked to us before, deepening the mystery around our presence here. He said that some kid had slashed his tires, so that's why he had to bike here and that's why he was late. He had also talked to Arthur on his way in, the man we first met on the park on our way in. He asked if we had talked to Natalie Crow yet. With nothing to hide, I saw it best to tell him the truth. We had talked to her, and not too long beforehand. With this information, though, he asked us to return to our car and leave this park. With this, Harrison left. After he left, though, I said something strange. It appeared that we were the ones to slash his tires. Why, though? We slashed his tires and try and avoid him coming out to begin with. The mystery just kept deepening, but I wouldn't figure out why until far, far later. I returned to the room where I had found Natalie. On the wall, there was a diagram of how to operate a cane to retrieve something from deep underground. I already had acquired all but one piece of the operation and recognized where the next part was. I hurried to the location. It was in the Swan exhibit from the very start of the game. I used an egg-shaped diamond as the needed key and carefully piloted the Swan through the apparent obstacles towards the split in the gate. Once finishing this, I retrieved the needed chain from around its neck, sacrificing the Swan's head at the cost. I quickly advanced to the location of the crane and attached the chain to it. Began turning the handle, bringing up whatever was attached to the end. I brought it to the top, but there was a layer of ice and dirt surrounding the item. Thankfully, there was a blowtorch I prepared far earlier. I used this and melted away the surrounding frozen mixture and retrieved the woeful mask from inside. Once again, I knew where the mask belonged. It finally felt like the pieces were falling into place for me. I took the match to the witch's wood and unlocked the gate. Inside I found a maze. Many of the routes seemed blocked by pillars, but I was able to find other pillars that held the key. By turning the pillars to the same pattern as the obstacles, they would retract downwards, opening up the path for me. I arrived at the center of the maze and reached deep into the cauldron inside. I found the trident, a key to the chest in the underwater area. As soon as I withdrew the trident, though, monsters flooded into the maze. I quickly made a beeline for the exit and sprinted to the restaurant in the underwater exhibit. I used the trident to activate the 4 dragons, and it unlocked the chest that was sitting in the center of the room. I found inside the silver key, something I could use to open up chests and doors all around the park. The first thing I did was return to the original starting area where my car was, and unlock the back of a broken down car I had noticed at the start of the game. I found a pair of running shoes inside, which almost doubled my sprinting speed. After that, I returned back inside to the arcade room and turned the power on. I scored the needed points at each of the games, and retrieved the data disc from inside the ticket booth. I then returned back to the employees' corridor, where I found a door needing the silver key. I opened it, and inside I found Mr. Tolman, one of Mr. Crow's associates. After talking to Mr. Tolman for a moment, I went to the nursery area of the park, where I used the data disk on the computer to open up the top of the train model. Inside, I found a flamethrower. I returned to Mr. Tolman's office to try and get the elevator up and running again. I asked for his help, but he refused. I did find VHS tapes on a nearby desk, and was able to find clues in each of the tapes. I was able to use these to reactivate all the elevators in the area. But before I left the room, Mr. Tolman gave me a warning. He told me not to go down to the basement, and that I would regret if I did. This frightened me, but I knew it must be done, and continued on to the basement. Inside the room, I found a lever to activate the roots. I didn't fully know what the roots were at this point, but I knew they had a severe connection to the vile monsters that had overrun the park. I flipped the lever. Suddenly, the pool table behind me splintered apart, with a revolting, pulsing monster rising from under it. The monster continued to be more and more foul every time I saw them. This one was enough to make me sick. It was slimy. It didn't have a lower half of a body, just arms and what resembled a face. I finished it off, and its body collapsed inwards on itself, and he melted away. After activating the roots, I met up with Julia. I needed her help to operate a ride to acquire a battery from inside the water coaster. She started the ride for me, and I floated into the unknown. Inside the ride, I found animatronic mermaids. I pried one open. Inside I found a battery. I knew I needed it, but it was dead. I knew where I could charge the battery, but first I wanted to return and check on Julia. I returned though, she was gone. All I found were bloodstains on the ground and an open vent. I had to carry on though. All I could do was hope. I continued through the tunnels and soon found somewhere I could charge the battery. I hurried through and charged it as fast as I could. I used the battery to move the large crow at the opening gate away from the final elevator, leading down to Edward Crow's underground lab. All that was left was return to Edward's office and activate the elevator. While exploring his office, trying to find the switch used to activate the final elevator, the phone rang, one last time. It was Edward Crowe. It always had been him calling. He was calling from his lab down below. He told me we couldn't let a single of the monsters escape. We couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk the possibility of them infecting or hurting anyone else ever again. I knew that this was all almost over. The nightmare was nearing its end, but it wasn't quite over. We put in the code to activate the elevator and continued on into the lab. As soon as the doors of the elevator opened, though, we found ourselves in a room purely inhabited by more of the disgusting creatures. I tried to run, but found no escape. Soon I was cornered, and had no choice but to fight back. By some miracle, I was able to survive this encounter with minimal injuries. I continued on to the next room. On the floor was Harrison, the detective that had been sent here to help. He had been shot dead, which meant that there was someone here killing people. Not one of the monsters, but one of the humans I had likely met. Harrison had done nothing wrong. He didn't deserve this. He was just a poor man trying to do his job. He got tangled up into a mess he never could have expected. I couldn't help him now. It was too late. All I could do was try and find out who killed him. I hurried on into the next room, where I found Mr. Coleman. I told him about Harrison and about how somebody had shot him. Suddenly, Tremble walked up behind us, gun aimed steadily. He said it was nothing personal, but he was doing what had to be done. He got all tied up in this business, and he couldn't risk what would happen to him if it was all exposed. He blamed me too. He said I had gotten too talkative to Harrison, and that's why he had to kill him, and soon us. He gave us a chance to leave, but we hadn't taken it. Suddenly, though, I heard a sound from the vent next to him. The noise came again. We weren't sure what it was. Suddenly, Julia burst forth from the vent, pushing Tremble into the abyss below. I thanked her and continued downwards towards Crowe's lab. Everything we had done was leading to this. We'd spent the last hours fighting withered, corrupted monsters. We had uncovered dozens of mysteries, some still unsolved. We had met companions that became friends, and friends who became enemies. It all came down to these final moments. We were finally going to uncover the truth. We entered the lab. We saw Crowe, sitting calmly in a chair across from us, his body clearly mutated. He greeted us, but he didn't call us Mira. He called us Elena. We were the girl that had been infected 2 years ago. Finally, the puzzle came together. Why were we here? How we knew so much about the park? Why we didn't want Harrison here? It all made sense. Still, Crowe went on. He asked us how we were feeling. Tired and hurt. The doctor years ago had no way to combat the infection, and so it was still harming us to this day, and it was getting worse. We had run from the hospital because we had to tell Crowe something, and we wanted to say it to his face. We were going to die of the infection. It was his fault. He knew what he was doing, and he kept going. But Crowe had the infection as well. He was the first one to be infected. He confided in us that the first monster that came out of the pool was nearly human. But as they chopped away at the roots that had liquid gold inside, the guests became more and more grotesque until they became what we saw now. But they kept doing it for the gold and money. Crowe decided that because of what he had done, he wanted to see what was on the other side of the pool. He was going to dip in and discover what he had done. He instructed us, though, that if anything came out, including him, kill it without a second thought. He He said goodbye, and with that, he tipped his chair back and fell into the pool. The roots collapsed into the pool with him. Everything was still. But as I feared, the water started bubbling. Crow in a new grotesque body emerged from the pool. I know it must be done, and started firing at Crow's new form. As I did, the pool turned from a clear, serene lake to blood red. Crow repeatedly slashed and rushed at me. I fought for my life, continuously shooting at him. But before too long, it was over. Crow, with his last ounce of consciousness, pleaded with me to end it. And with one final shot, the nightmare was over. It felt as though everything might be okay, but maybe not.